Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered Weekly. I am your host, Adriana Cruz. So typically what we do for Unfiltered Weekly is I like to find lots of different types of topics that are not part of your everyday news cycle, and just to share some fun, different, and interesting things taking place around the world, whether it be top news, things happening here in the US or across the states in another country, something that is viral, something that's trending on social media. This week is going to be a little bit different. I'm specifically going to stay on one topic. I did a little bit of a deep dive of a story that I really wanted to share. So hopefully you like this edition of Unfiltered Weekly. As always, make sure to follow and connect with us. We are all over social media. And always, you can find more details on my website at johnnettcruz.com. All of the information that I'm going to be talking about on this episode of Unfiltered Weekly will also be on a blog post if you want to check out the websites, sources, any of those things. So let's get into our topic today. So this week's Unfiltered Weekly is about the story of Adriana Smith. Adriana and her story, along with her family, has been in social media, in the news for months. And I finally got the chance and the opportunity to take a little bit of a deeper dive into her story and what actually happened, and I want to be able to share it. Adriana Smith was a 31-year-old registered nurse and a mother of one who was declared brain dead back in February of this year after suffering severe blood clots in her brain. And at the time, she was just 8 weeks pregnant. So why was she kept alive even though she was actually declared brain dead? Smith was kept on life support for months against her family's wishes due to doctors' concerns about Georgia's Living Infants Fairness and Equality Act. This law was actually enacted back in 2022 after Roe versus Wade was overturned. Bans most abortions once fetal cardiac activity is detected, which is typically around 6 weeks of pregnancy, and grants personhood rights to a fetus. So doctors reportedly told Smith's family that because she was brain dead and no longer considered to be in a medical emergency that threatened her own life, the law required them to maintain life support until the fetus could be delivered. However, the Georgia Attorney General's office later clarified that the Life Act does not require medical professionals to keep a woman on life support after brain death, stating that removing life support is not an action with the purpose to terminate a pregnancy. Despite this, the hospital where Smith was treated, which was over at Emory University Hospital, did not publicly comment on the Attorney General's statement. Some legal experts suggest that Georgia's advanced directive for the Healthcare Act, which has a pregnancy exclusion prioritizing the survival of an unborn child in certain circumstances, may have played a role in the hospital's decision. Adriana Smith's family, particularly her mother, April Newkirk, expressed immense heartbreak and frustration over this situation. Newkirk described the experience as torture, stating, "I see my daughter breathing, but she's not there." She emphasized that while they don't know if they would have chosen to terminate the pregnancy, they should have been given the choice. Newkirk firmly believes that all women should have a choice about their bodies. The family rallied for Adriana's law to ensure individuals retain agency over their own medical decisions, even when pregnant. Adriana Smith's baby, a boy named Chance, was delivered back on June 13th, weighing 1 pound and 13 ounces. Smith was taken off of life support 4 days later on June 17th. Her funeral actually took place just this past weekend at Fairfield Baptist Church just outside of Atlanta. There were hundreds of mourners that were in attendance, and the service was live streamed. You can actually find it if you Google it. I believe it's on YouTube. Loved ones, including her younger sister, spoke at the service, praising Smith's love, kindness, and wisdom. The Atlanta Metropolitan Nursing Honor Guard also paid a tribute to Smith as a registered nurse. And as of the latest reports, baby Chance is still in the neonatal intensive care unit after being born prematurely. His grandmother, April, stated, "He's just fighting. We want prayers for him, and we just want to keep praying for him since he's here now." The family has set up a GoFundMe page to help with expenses for both of Adriana's children, and that GoFundMe has raised over $450,000. The case of Adriana Smith has ignited a huge debate highlighting the complex intersection of medical ethics, reproductive rights, and evolving legal interpretations in a post-Roe versus Wade America. I want to share arguments from both sides. So here are the arguments from a pro-life stance. Those who argue for keeping a brain-dead pregnant woman on life support, even against the family's wishes, often base their arguments on the following points. So the first one is on fetal personhood. The core of this argument is that once a fetal heartbeat is detected, as is the case under Georgia's Life Act, the fetus is considered a legal person with its own right to life. Therefore, ending life support for the mother, even if she is brain dead, would be seen as indirectly terminating the life of the fetus, which right now is currently prohibited under the state's abortion ban. Then you have protection of unborn life. Proponents of this view emphasize the moral imperative to protect and preserve all innocent human life, including that of an unborn child. They see the continuation of life support as a last resort to give the fetus a chance to develop to viability and be born. Then we have the third case on miracle babies and for some potential of life. Some highlight cases where maintaining psychological or physiological support for brain-dead pregnant women has resulted in the birth of a living child, framing these outcomes just as miracles that justify extraordinary measures. Unintended consequences of abortion laws. While the Georgia Attorney General clarified that the Life Act doesn't require keeping brain-dead women on life support, some hospitals and legal interpretations may err on the side of caution due to fear of prosecution or civil liability under strict abortion bans. This fear in of itself can lead to decisions to prolong life support. There's also the value of every life. From a moral and sometimes even religious perspective, every life is inherently valuable, and efforts should be made to preserve it whenever possible. So now here are the arguments against maintaining life support from a patient's rights stance. Those who advocate for discontinuing life support for brain-dead pregnant women, aligning with Adriana Smith's family wishes, emphasize this: bodily autonomy and self-determination. This is a fundamental ethical and legal principle. Individuals have the right to make decisions about their own bodies and medical care, including end-of-life decisions. So when a person is brain dead, their previously expressed wishes, so for an example, if they have through, an advance directive, or they have specific wishes written down or wishes of their designated surrogate to be respected, to continue life support against those wishes are seen as a profound violation of bodily autonomy, even in death. So going into what the actual definition of death is. Brain death is legally recognized as death. Continuing to use a deceased person's body as an incubator without their consent or the consent of their family is viewed by some as dehumanizing and unethical. It transforms a person into a ventilated corpse, basically a means to an end. This also sparks concerns of torture and prolonged sufferings for the families that are involved, as expressed by Adriana's mother. Keeping a brain-dead loved one on life support creates an agonizing and prolonged period of grief and uncertainty for the family. It prevents them from truly mourning and finding closure. And you also have to remember, she was already a mother. She has another child in this situation. There's also a lack of explicit legal requirement. The Georgia Attorney General's clarification that the Life Act does not mandate keeping brain-dead women on life support strengthens the argument that such actions are not legally required and may instead stem from an overly cautious or misinformed interpretation of the law. There's also the experimental nature of prolonged gestation, cadaveric gestation. From a medical perspective, prolonged gestation in a brain-dead body, particularly from a very early pregnancy, is considered highly experimental. This is limited data on outcomes. or there is limited data on outcomes, and concerns exist about the health and the well-being of the child born under such circumstances. Ethical concerns about planned orphanhood as well. Some bioethicists raise questions about the ethical implications of bringing a child into the world in such a way where the child will be an orphan from birth and potentially carry the emotional burden of their mother's tragic circumstances. Another reason is to focus on the patient. Medical ethics traditionally prioritize the well-being and the rights of the patient. In the case of a brain-dead individual, the patient is the deceased person, and their wishes regarding end-of-life care should be paramount, not the potential of a fetus they're carrying. I think Adriana's case not only highlights all the complexities of this near abortion ban and law that is or has taken place for the last several years, but it also shows how the law is being interpreted in many different places, and how, because of the interpretation is being communicated, us women who find ourselves in these horrific and awful circumstances are not getting the proper treatment that we are seeking for our health. And in turn, we are the ones suffering from this, all because there seems to be this ginormous disconnect when it comes to this topic and this law and this subject. When I was researching all of this, I found many more stories. She is just one of many. This one right here, Avery Davis Bell, she's from Atlanta. She also spoke out after Georgia's strict abortion ban reportedly delayed life-saving care during her traumatic miscarriage. Despite severe hemorrhaging and her baby having no chance of survival, doctors allegedly hesitated to perform a necessary procedure due to fears of violating the state's 6-week abortion law. Bell nearly died, requiring a blood transfusion. Her story, alongside other preventable deaths linked to the ban, highlights growing concerns that restrictive abortion laws are forcing doctors to delay critical care, endangering women's lives, not only in Georgia, but in other states. And that's just one story that happened back in October of 2024. She's married, she already had a child, they were looking forward to this one, and so this is just one of many. Adriana Smith's case tragically spotlights the intense ethical and legal battles over reproductive rights right now. It forces us to confront how society tries to balance a fetal's changing legal status against a person's fundamental right to make their own medical decisions, even at the very end of life. I also want to turn now to another story that was actually recently shared. Specifically, I pulled it from Fox News because, again, this was something I saw trending on social media, and I was really interested in seeing what this specific story was. So Fox News did a piece that features Representative Kat Cammack. She's a Republican from Florida who spoke out after her office was forced to evacuate due to death threats from pro-abortion activists. So these threats reportedly intensified after Cammack shared her own personal experience with an ectopic pregnancy in an interview that she did with the Wall Street Journal. She stated that during her own medical emergency, doctors were initially hesitant to treat her life-threatening condition, fearing legal repercussions under Florida's restrictive abortion ban. Cammack attributed this hesitation to, in quotes, I should say, fear-mongering and misinformation that is spread by opponents of the law, clarifying that her situation was a medical emergency and not an abortion, and that she did not vote for Florida's heartbeat law as she serves in the U.S. House of Representatives and not the Florida legislator. So that specific article and interview highlights even the severe backlash and intimidation faced by lawmakers involved in the abortion debate, as well as the ongoing confusion and fear among medical providers navigating new state abortion laws, even concerning life-saving procedures for conditions that she just went through. Law enforcement is reportedly investigating the death threats that were received by Cammack and her family and her staff. So we have a situation here where this person did not vote for this because that's what she does not do in her area of expertise when it comes to the government. And she receives backlash because she's trying to share the story of, look, there is a problem and we need to take a closer look at what this loss of communication is. And instead of people coming together, I think people are just so angry and frustrated that they resort to violence and death threats, which I think is just absolutely horrible. You're already dealing with a horrific situation where you have to end a pregnancy. And on top of it, now you are having to deal with additional threats in that manner. And I think obviously violence is never the answer. And we should never, ever resort to that. But I think violence at its core and its root is showing hurt under the anger and the frustration of what has been happening and how this can very well be pretty detrimental to women's health in regards to that. And how do we approach that, every single time? How many times does this have to happen for us women to get the proper medical attention that we need? I think at this point, people can argue that it's about the life of a child. And then people can argue it's about saving the life of the mother. They're both arguments that are clearly being communicated, but no one seems to be listening to one another. I'm going to throw my own personal opinion in here, and I typically don't do that. I mean, for podcast format, sometimes I do. On the news side, I don't. I stick to the facts. But me being a woman, and I would never, ever, I don't even know what I would do in that situation. That is sad because, women, a lot of women can't wait for that moment to get pregnant and to share that experience, and then to have it to be not only taken away, but then also to have to fight for your own life so that you can heal as you grieve. I mean, that's a whole nother level. And then to possibly be in a circumstance where you are grieving the loss of a loved one because of a horrific situation, and you're not able to grieve and move forward and mourn a person because the decision is not in your hands. For some reason, it's the hands of the government. It's a pretty hard pill to swallow. I feel like it's a pretty sensitive topic. And I know people have very strong opinions about it. But regardless of the matter is, women need to have the medical attention when it comes to these emergency situations. And it shouldn't have to cost their lives solely because there's confusion on a law. So where's the disconnect here? Who is responsible for interpreting how these laws are coming out state by state? And why is it these medical professionals are not knowing these laws like the back of their hand, so that when they do come across a situation where there is a medical emergency with a woman and she's trying to save her life, that she's being told she has to do something else or it's being put on hold? When I was researching this topic, I came across hundreds of articles of women getting denied treatment because medical professionals did not know what to do. And so because they were scared, perhaps, of moving forward in some of these situations, they put the mother's life on the line for not getting the adequate care in time, which then leads to other things, which can be life-threatening or the loss of life. If you just Google it, it's out there. I'm going to be posting a blog with all of this, and it's all the sources, is everything that I researched. Again, I just wanted to do a deeper dive with this because when I saw the story of Adriana and her family and what they've had to endure over the last 4 to 6 months, I mean, I can't imagine. So my heart and my prayers go out to that family. And now that baby Chance is here, I am rooting for that baby. I hope that baby, is healthy and recovers and is given the love that it needs since it's now here. But again, I wanted to bring this to attention. My podcast, again, is about bringing some tough issues aboard and having these really hard conversations. And I don't know, to me, sometimes it's not, at the end of the day, it's a hard topic, especially when you're throwing in faith and religion and spirituality and beliefs and rights and reproductive rights and who has a say over someone's reproductive system. I mean, it's a scary thing. It's a very scary thing. I had to have a hysterectomy because I have an autoimmune disorder. And I was told that if I got pregnant again, I would not be able to carry the baby. It wouldn't make it. So if I chose not to have that hysterectomy, right? And this law went into effect and I did get pregnant, but then automatically that pregnancy would not be viable because of my own personal situation. It's scary to think that I could be in one of these horrible instances where they're not taking in consideration the woman's health and their condition and what might lie ahead when the woman already has an established life and maybe has other kids or is married, or, there's so many things. And that's a really, really scary thing to think. Had I not take that precaution. I have other issues. There's multiple reasons why I got a hysterectomy, but that could have been an outcome for me. So it's a hard thing to process as a woman, for sure. Regardless of religion or regardless of what side you sit on in terms politically, I think as a woman, it's a hard thing to think about. So anyways, I want to leave you with this week's episode of Unfiltered Weekly. Again, I know it's not our typical interesting 5 or 10 minute little short podcasts and short stories on news, but I thought it was super important for us to have this conversation today. And just to shed light on some of those things that, people are having really big debates online, and people have lots to say about it. And I wanted to be able to present both sides. So you can find all the details. I'm going to put a blog post on all of the sources I used, website stories, all of that. It'll be online at my website at JohnetteCruz.com. See you guys next time.